kitty. Come here.
She was standoffish, but she let me scratch her.
There we go.
She's posing for you.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. We're on a Viking ship taking us from Avignon to Lyon over the next 8 days. Each day there's an excursion that's included with the purchase of our cruise. We'll follow a local guide through the town where we're docked, or we may even be whisked away on a comfortable bus to a destination in the area. These included tours mean we don't pay anything extra for them. They're part of our overall cruise package. In this video, I'll recap the excursions we took along the Rhone River. The day we boarded, there was a quick tour of Avignon after lunch. That evening, we left Avignon, heading south to the town of Arles. I'm not going to cover all the historical information I learned on these outings. It's better that you travel to these locations to experience that for yourself. The purpose of this video is to share an overview of the range of stuff you'll do on a Viking River cruise. There are also additional tours most days that you can sign up for and purchase online prior to your trip. We chose to join the included tour each morning, then explore on our own later in the day. I'll show some sights from these excursions, as well as point out how we were able to schedule other sightseeing on our own before the ship set sail for our next destination. Every evening after dinner, you come back to your cabin and find the next day's excursion ticket and your group number. The groups are usually around 30 people. It's now the first full day of our cruise. We just finished breakfast and are about to join our group to explore the city. There's quite a bit to see here. We'll wander through Roman ruins, particularly the amphitheater, and hear a bit about one of this town's famous former residents, Vincent van Gogh. Our introduction to Arles was walking only, no buses were necessary. We moored on the Rhone just outside the town center, and after about a 10-minute stroll, we were at the main gate. Over the next 3 hours, we encountered some inclines, but there was really no strenuous walking. Plus, we had a couple of breaks during the morning. Our key stop was the Roman Amphitheater, a UNESCO World Heritage Site where we were able to enter the stands and admire how well preserved it is after 2,000 years. It was built in the 1st century, and major restoration on it began in the 19th century. I think a morning walk through Roman ruins, discussions about the area, and an art history refresher about the time of Van Gogh's life when he was in the south of France is a fairly decent way to spend a Thursday morning. Around the town, there are plaques highlighting some of Van Gogh's work that he created when he was here, such as this one right outside the amphitheater we were just in.
Well, we'll recognize what we see. We've seen it all in the paintings.
You'll be able to enter the courtyard that he painted when he stayed at this familiar location. We returned to the ship for lunch and still had time to venture back to town on our own. That day, we visited the Van Gogh Foundation. Although you won't find his paintings here, you will find rotating art and exhibits from other artists. When we visited, it was an exhibit from several contemporary artists focusing on the color yellow that's so prevalent in many of the works Van Gogh painted while staying in Arles. The foundation is well worth visiting. Prior to this cruise, we had spent several days exploring Arles, and there are several more other sights to see in this city. I'll be covering some of them in a later video. We set sail later that evening, heading back to Avignon. It was pleasant to be gliding along the river during dinner. The next day was sunny, just what you'd expect in southern France. Similar to yesterday, the tour was walking only. No buses or public transit were needed. We set off to see Avignon, which is also a wonderful walking city. One of our main stops is the Palace of the Popes, another UNESCO World Heritage Site. Avignon was the seat of the Catholic Church for much of the 1300s before it was moved back again to Vatican City. Apart from the palace likely being the most well-known site in town, it was great that Viking included this for us, as it really helps to have a guide take you through and explain its history, why it was constructed, and stories about the popes who resided here. This is a leisurely walk. At times you could sit in the courtyards and hear stories of what happened in the palace over the years. After the palace, we walked through the streets to learn more about the area and see a few other churches, as well as the synagogue. Constructed in the 19th century, it stands in the former Jewish quarter. We made our way to the market hall, where you can purchase fresh food and other items, including lavender, which is popular in this area. You'll see locals having lunch or enjoying a drink. Here is where we took a 30 or so minute break to explore. There were 2 additional excursions you could take later in the day. One was a tasting at Châteauneuf-du-Pape Winery. If you know wine, you'll recognize this vineyard. The other was a trip to Pont-de-Gard, one of the best preserved Roman aqueducts. We chose to remain in town as there were a few art museums that we wanted to see, as well as the famous bridge. We were asked to be back on board by 6:15 in the evening, as we would be setting sail for Viviers shortly thereafter. As I mentioned on my last Viking River Cruise video, guests will check out of the ship and check back into the ship by scanning their cabin keys. That way the crew can account for everyone on board. Staff on the ship did a wonderful job keeping track of all of us and keeping us informed of the schedule, especially when we were setting sail. Be sure to listen to your crew when they give you instructions or directions. Our next port was Vivier.
Morning, sir. Good morning.
I woke up to some wonderful views of a rather foggy Rhone. This town was quite a bit more populated during the Middle Ages, and it was important for trade due to its location on the river. The views were equally stunning before and after it lifted. Like previous days, we went through the old town to learn about the history of the area. Our goal was to ascend the hill to the cathedral. Here's a shot of the hill from the town center. Tough to make out everything that's up there due to the fog, but I'll show you what there is to see as soon as we reach the top. There was quite a bit of walking along cobblestone streets up the steep hill. The crew and the guide will alert you when some walks are a bit more strenuous, and you can always ask prior to leaving how difficult they think the tour will be. Most of the guests on board with us were fine with all guided tours each day. Even though the population on board skewed a bit older, many were fit and active. Viking provides options for everyone. In Lyon, they even had a more energetic tour than usual. You had to sign up for it, and unfortunately by the time we inquired, it was full. I think slightly more vigorous walks would be a hit with many guests, so ideally they'll offer more in the future. It was a nice time admiring the buildings that line these narrow passageways, some of which are vaulted. Be sure to take your time, pay attention to the ground you're walking on, and wear appropriate shoes. Once we made it all the way to the top, there were views to admire, plus a cathedral you could visit. We were sailing out earlier than usual today, so the crew asked that everyone be back on board no later than 12:45. We had a little over an hour to explore the town after the walking tour finished. Most people headed back to the boat, but we checked out a couple of local shops. Coming back out, we noticed that the fog had lifted, so we made a quick trek back up to the top for a better view of the surrounding areas.
Yeah, so this morning it was foggy, but still really pretty. Just sort of an eerie pretty. And now it's foggy, but we can clearly see, I'm guessing another 2 or 3 miles at least. Oh, more than that, because look, that's well in the distance. It's a pretty big area. It's sort of a tiny medieval town, but there's a lot going on outside it. There's our boat.
The rest of the afternoon was spent sailing along the Rhone and admiring the views. Walking around French towns isn't all you'll do. The next day we found ourselves on a train. This outing was one of my favorites. There was no walking. We hopped on a comfortable bus that took us to a train station in the Ardeche mountains. Viking booked us tickets on a steam train that took us up to the top. Upon arrival, we were given plenty of time to visit the gift shop as well as the train museum. Upon boarding the train, we learned about the history of the area on our ascent to the top. Once there, you have time to enjoy the natural scenery. You get to see how a steam train rotates on its turntable, pulls forward, then backs up to the passenger cars so it can head back down the mountain. After the train ride, the bus returned us to the ship so we could sail up to Vienne, where another walking tour was on schedule for the afternoon. The day was spent enjoying a few drinks on the ship while watching in wonder from our French balcony as we sailed through the locks. Unfortunately for us, one of the lock gates got stuck and we lost time waiting for it to be repaired. As a result, we arrived in Vienne too late for the walking tour.
So close to the lock wall.
There was time to walk part of Vienne on your own if you wish to do so before or after dinner. We arrived in our final port of Lyon on Monday and stayed docked there until we disembarked for home on Wednesday. Our first outing kept us in France's third largest city. It was not strenuous as a bus brought us up to the top of the hill, then back down again. Our tour included sights on top of the hill, mainly the Basilica, and then a tour of Old Lyon at the bottom of the hill along the Rhone River. Lyon is where the confluence of the Rhone meets the Saône. Our bus took us past Roman ruins on our way to the Basilica.
And that's the first city of Lyon. It was erected 2,000 years ago. That's also an older city, a city that was erected by the Romans. It started as then a Roman colony. So more precisely, the city was founded here by Lucius Munatius Blancus. I'm sure you will remember of his name.
From there, we visited the Basilica and learned about its history and construction. After exiting, we were afforded time to wander atop the hill and take in the panoramic views of Lyon. In the distance you can see the few high-rises. Two of them are affectionately referred to as the Pencil and the Eraser. We then rode back down the hill, eventually parking along the Rhone River. At the bottom of the hill, we learned about the old part of the city and were introduced to the fact that Lyon is France's food capital. There are bouchons throughout the city that have characteristic local foods for you to try. You had the option of then walking back to the ship on your own, which we chose to do, or wait for the bus to take you. In fact, in the spirit of full disclosure, this is one walking tour we thought was a bit too slow. As I mentioned, the more active tour filled up before we could join. So as a result, we eventually separated from the included excursion while we were in Old Lyon and explored the rest of it on our own with guidebooks. We then walked back to the boat for lunch. We knew that we were planning on staying a few days past the cruise in Lyon and that we could catch up on any sites we missed.
Oh, is this where we catch the Vaporetto?
The next morning, our final full day on the cruise, we woke up once more in Lyon. I got ready for another of my favorite adventures on this trip, a bus ride into wine country.
Here?
But Beaujolais is located a bit far away inland.
As I mentioned, in Avignon there was an additional tour you could take to a famous winery. Well, one of the reasons we chose not to go on that, other than there was an additional charge, was the fact that Viking was going to take us to wine country as part of our cruise package anyway.
Should we go up and see the church and the building from the 11th century? No, 12th century, wasn't it? 1100s.
This was the week that Beaujolais Nouveau was to be released, so we were off to learn all about the different types of Beaujolais wine that are available.
This is going to be a 5-day party.
We traveled about 60 kilometers to Beaujolais to see that town getting ready for the release. We had an opportunity to admire some of the buildings and visit a local church.
This is a cute town. Should we come here tomorrow night? Come back? A bit too far?
After wandering the town for half an hour or so, the group split up to go to different wineries. Our group made its way to the Chateau de Vienne and were met by a longtime worker who told us how this vineyard operates, provided a tutorial on how wine is made, and showed us the equipment that's used.
So it starts at the Arles, really important time, because as I told you, the market is and when they pick up the berries, they just don't take the berries, they take the whole branches and put everything.
We were then offered a sampling. It may have been a little bit before noon local time, but just about everyone took part in the tasting.
So about, donc tu m'as dit 10 jours de cuvée.
Ouais, 10, non, quinzaine de jours même.
15 days in the vats.
You could purchase bottles directly from the winery to enjoy back on the ship, or take home with you to share with friends.
So it was the Beaujolais Village. I think that was the one that we in the 1809.
As a side note, we were in Lyon after the cruise and made sure to be in the city square at midnight when the barrels of Beaujolais Nouveau were rolled off the boats and made their way to what was a very fun party.
Beaujolais, Beaujolais, Beaujolais. Beaujolais, Beaujolais, Beaujolais. Beaujolais, Beaujolais, Beaujolais. Beaujolais, Beaujolais, Beaujolais. Au cours d'un long voyage en nous.
More of this footage will be in a future video, so do remember to subscribe so you won't miss it. I hope this provides you a taste of what the included excursions are like. Our days covered a bit of everything, from the history of the areas we visited to local customs and cultures, Talks on the ship augmented what you saw either that day or what you would see the following day. Most of our tour guides were local to the area, although one was British who had lived in France for a long time. The one in Arles was a particular favorite, but they all brought their own personality and insights to the tours. Although all of the tour groups from our ship were hitting the same spots, we got some more or less personalized information depending on the guide. There was plenty of time to ask questions either in the group or individually. Thanks for watching. Again, please subscribe as I'll be adding more videos from my time in France shortly, and as I just mentioned, there will be more about Beaujolais Nouveau.
Beaujolais, Beaujolais.